Hi, my name is Adriel William, and today's video is for all the foreign trained dentists, for individuals who are applying to dentist schools in the United States, and even for people who are planning to apply to medical residencies or postgrad residency. So in today's video, I'm going to talk to you how you can write your personal statement, your SOP, in a manner that will make it more interesting, more fascinating for the admission committee to read it and increase your chances of getting an invite or getting accepted to that program. So I'll discuss that with you in this video. But before I do that, I'm going to share with you a brief story of my personal life. So in 2016, I was in Pakistan. I did my dental school. I was doing oral surgery residency, but I wanted to move to US. I had this phenomenal urge that I wanted to go out of Pakistan. I wanted to explore my limits, see the universe, and try something new. So at that given time, I got some inheritance from my late father, and I had this money, so I wanted to move out. So I started looking into master's program where I can go as an international student to the United States. And being the naive kid I was at that given time, I went to different student consultant agency and asked them about master's program. And one of this guy finally said, I got you admission into George Mason University, which is in DC, and they will charge you about $75,000 back in 2016 per annum. And it's a 2 years program. So calculate that about $150K US dollars at that given time. And I was like super excited. I thought, oh, I got accepted to a master's program. I'm going to US. And even though I didn't had that much money at that time in my bank account to pay for that 2 years fee, but I was super excited that this guy got me accepted. And so what I did, I came back home. I picked up my phone on the WhatsApp. I called one of my cousins who was living in Maryland, had been in US since the past 15 years, came as a international student himself, went to Harvard and did big things. So I called him. I said, hey, listen, I got accepted to George Mason University in a master's in global health administration degree. And the consultant said it's $75,000 per annum tuition fee. And I'm really excited. And that guy paused for a second and he said, well, here's the thing. If that consultant is so smart to get you accepted to a school in US, what is he doing in Pakistan? Shouldn't he be coming to US himself as a student if he's so smart? And at that given time, I went silent. I was like, really, if he was actually so smart, he should have left Pakistan by now. So this guy was making sense at that time. And he said, well, how about this? I give you a contact to a different school. Apply there on your own. You don't need any student consultant. You can ask me. And I actually took his recommendation, applied to Mount St. Mary University, and I did 2 years of Masters in Health Administration back from 2016 till 18, and my whole tuition fee was $32,000. So where on one spot, this consultant was giving me a master's program for $150K, I did it in $32K. And one of the lessons I learned from that incident made me less naive and taught me to be a little bit more educative about finding help, finding coaches. And hopefully by the end of this video, I'll connect the dot why I said this story and how this can help you in your process to applying to dental schools. Now coming back to personal statements. So personal statement is a letter, is a statement. Imagine if when I work with a candidate, and this is how I look at personal statements. Imagine if somebody was making a movie on your life. When I was writing my personal statement for the dental school, I tell people I'm the youngest in my house. And when you're youngest in the house, you never get enough attention. You're always deprived of attention and you do silly things to get attention. That's all the youngest kid for any house is. The eldest one gets the most attention because they are the firstborn. So when I was writing this personal statement, I was like, finally, I got a chance to write down my story and show that I'm the hero of my own story. That was my thought process. And whenever I work with a candidate, I tell them, imagine if we were directing a movie or writing a book on your life. I want to know the strongest points in your life. And one of the most important thing I'll tell you in any application, your exams, your INBD, your TOEFL score, all of that is very important. Those are non-changeable things. Whatever you get in your TOEFL, that's your score. You're going to live with it, you're going to apply with it. But when it comes to the writing part, one of the key things that can have the most major effect in your application is your personal statement. And in that personal statement, your first paragraph is the main hook. If you want to take away one thing from this video, remember, your first paragraph is the one that's going to make the most difference in your personal statement. So when I'm writing the first paragraph, when I'm sitting down with a candidate, talking to them, thinking and doing some brainstorming, how are we going to write your first paragraph, I tell them that your first paragraph is your origin story. Now, let me break this down for you. Any good story that you remember from your childhood, any good movie, any good book, whether it is a religious story, any Abrahamic story, whether it's the story of Christ, whether it's the story of Abraham, whether it's the story of Superman, whether it's the story of Harry Potter, you will always find that the story starts with an origin story. There's always a divine child, the chosen kid. That's the matrix, the chosen one. The story always starts with person who had some calling, something special in his life. That's the story of King Arthur. The kid had something happen to him during his early childhood that made him different. He was chosen. That's the Harry Potter story when his parents died and his mother cast a spell to save him, which made him very different. He was the one who was going to take down Voldemort, right? So that's the story of the divine child. That's the origin story. So any story, whenever it is written, the origin is very important. So as a dentist, for example, if you're writing a story, you need to talk about your childhood, something about your family. And I know 3 examples which people use a lot of time. Either their sibling fell down or they fell down, broke a tooth. They took him to the doctor. He saw the doctor, fell in love, wanted to become a dentist. Second, somebody had braces in their childhood and it changed their smile and that really inspired them to become a dentist. The third thing people mention is that either their parent, uncle, auntie, somebody, mother or brother was a dentist and they went to their clinic. It really inspired them. They became a dentist. If this is your story, it's good. Now, the point is how you're going to create rhythm in this story. When I watch videos and listen to a lot of people who discuss personal statements, and one of the things that a little bit annoys me is that they create formulas. They see this as a mathematical gameplay. And my personal context in this whole Capit cycle personal statement interview that this is not a formula, this is your life and it's a piece of artwork. You need to think that this is my story, I'm the director of it, how am I going to write it in a way that will make me look like somebody who's interesting. This is part of your personal branding. Remember, you're becoming a dentist. At this point, you think, I don't care about personal branding and all that crap. This is something of a YouTube thing or social media marketing. It's not. One day, you're going to graduate as a dentist and you're going to be working with managers, with owners. And if you don't know how to market yourself, how to negotiate, how to sell your skill, you would be underpaid. Your skill will be compromised. So even as a dentist in US, you need to have craftsmanship, able to work with your hand. You should have good communication skill, like being a good orator, your ability to communicate. And the third thing you should have as a dentist is good salesmanship. That's very important when you're talking about treatments, when you're talking about scientific things, when you're telling somebody about braces, you should be able to convince what you're saying. And all of these come into your personal branding, and that's what I'm trying to link with your personal statement as well. I know this is a lot of knowledge, but down the line in years, you will thank me for this, because it all links up where I'm sitting now. And when I see myself 3-4 years back then, all of this during my master's in health administration, what I read, what I studied, what I heard around, what I saw on YouTube, the mistakes I saw from others, it all makes sense now. So when you're writing your personal statement, look at it as a piece of artwork. You need to start talking about your origin story, and you start off by something from your childhood. It could be your father might have been an engineer, or a person who liked to fix things at home. He liked to do painting. Your mother liked to sew things. There could be something in your childhood that fascinated you to work with your hands. Now, you went to a dentist, you had trauma, you got braces. That's also good, but you have to interpret exactly what happened during those interactions that ignited an emotion, that ignited a chemical chain of reaction in your brain, that you wanted to go for this vocation. Now remember my word, that I'm using the word vocation. I'm not saying a job. I'm not saying a field. A vocation is a calling. A calling is something, for example, when I see something that the candidates are asking questions about, for example, personal statement, they keep asking. One person asks, second, third. And after the fourth one, it becomes a calling for me. Okay, Adriel, you got to make a video about this. Write down some points, take the questions, and make a video. That's a personal calling which you feel. And in the same way, if you're going to talk about dentistry, and I know surgeons take it very seriously, the surgery is a calling. It's not a profession, because you just don't do it, you live it. And in the same way, when I talk about dentistry, you don't do it, you live it. Because trust me, it's not just a profession, it's a lifestyle. And when you're going to talk about it in your personal statement, talk about dentistry as your vocation. That's your first paragraph. Your first paragraph should talk about the origin of the story. Consider yourself as the hero or the main character of the story. So how this originated. And then always remember, in any story, any good rememberable story, the hero has a calling. All right, the main character has a calling. So Harry Potter was being called to that medical school. In the same way, Superman was being super on the earth, but they deny their calling. They don't want to go. Something happens which stops them, and they said, I'm better off as an average human being. I don't want to do it. There's some obstacles. In every hero story, you will show that there were obstacles that were stopping that person from going towards his calling. But there was some kind of support, some kind of mentor, some kind of a gray-haired wizard, a wise person who came into their life and supported them and gave them the push to accept their calling. Now, it can be Merlin for King Arthur. It can be Gandalf from the Lord of the Ring. It could be Hagrid for Harry Potter. But in all of these stories, there will be some mentor, some person, or somebody who gave the main character a push, a grey-haired wizard. So it was Dumbledore for Harry Potter as well. But in every story, you will see even Batman had his own Alfred, who was his grey-haired wizard. So in your personal statement, and I'll tell you why I'm narrating these comics, these novels, why I'm talking about these, because these stories, their patterns are so meaningful that whenever anybody reads them, they get fascinated to it. That's why there are thousands and billions of people who are crazy about Harry Potter. There are so many people who have been following Lord of the Ring for decades, because the way the pattern is written, it's a hero's mythology. And I'll discuss this later on a little bit more. But remember, you need to work on your origin story, how dentistry became your calling. The second part is what were the obstacles when you were doing dentistry back home, and how you had a mentor or a friend who pushed you to going for your next calling, which was to pursue dentistry in a country like US or Canada. So that's your second step, that your other calling, like the real calling that you want to say, was you got into dentistry, but the next thing was pursuing dentistry in the most advanced place possible. So I usually use this term that in order to be the best, you have to learn from the best. And for me, the best opportunity was United States, because the most innovative dentistry was being done in United States. And that was one of the reasons I was much more encouraged to go to United States for dentistry. So that's how you link your first paragraph to the second part. Now, here's the other important thing that you want to talk about. During your journey in US or in your application, you need to talk about a vulnerability. You should talk about your vulnerabilities. For example, I had candidates in the past who had 8 years of gap because they had family, they became mother, and they had other issues that they were dealing with, which is totally fine. And every normal human being understands that if you have kids, if you're a mother, you're going to have responsibility and you're going to take break, which is totally normal. And a lot of people ask me, I have a gap. Even as men, single people, when you migrate for 8-10 months, you have to work in a 7-Eleven or you have to do odd jobs. It's totally fine if you have a gap, and schools understand this. But, or maybe you failed in your INBD, or maybe you had an accident or something happened. One thing I'll tell you is that you want to utilize that vulnerability, that whatever that area of weakness was, and discuss it in your personal statement. That's very important, because that's what will show you as a human being. Every hero story, every good story will show that the hero had temptations, whether it was Christ being tempted by the devil for 40 days when he was fasting. And you will see the same thing when Batman went out of Gotham to be trained. He was with the League of Shadows, and that's where he was getting trained, but he was being tempted. He was being tested. In the same way, every hero story, you will see that the hero will get tested. So you want to talk about that vulnerability and what you learned out of that. That's very important, because you want to show that during those difficult times, the best version of you came out. You became more resilient. You became a lifelong learner. You got to know your real calling, that you want to pursue dentistry, and you can manage stress. This is very important for the schools. Personally, and you might have heard it in the story, I talk in my stories about how I lost my father, and it actually brought out the best version of myself, because within weeks, I grew up into a 40 years old man, even when I was 22. But I knew I had to be the most responsible person at my father's funeral. And that's something I discussed up there. And it's a part of me which was vulnerable, but I put it up there. And when you do it, people trust you. And that's one of the things, people who can discuss their weakness, their vulnerable sides, people tend to trust them. And that's a thing that you want to quote in your personal statement, so you gain some trust from your admission committee. That's very important. You want to show your humanly side. Other thing I'll tell you is that people sometimes say they quote a lot of their resume. It's fine, but personal statement is supposed to be personal. I had a couple of people I know who write a lot of personal statements during these seasons, and they tell people to keep it more mechanical, keep it straightforward, keep it to the point. Here's one psychological truth I'll tell you. A lot of these schools have female faculties who are reading these, or female staff. And I'm telling you one thing, as human being, men are more visual and women are better readers. they read and they feel things. If you want to make your application strong when you're writing things, you want to depict a little bit or somewhat of your emotional side. You want to show that you're a human being. You don't want to write you're somebody like Shelton from the Big Bang Theory, who was very smart, who passed the exam and who was autistic in his spectrum. That you don't want to show that you're a robotic, mechanical, high IQ person. You want to show that you're a hardworking, lifelong learner who dealt with failures but still had the ability to get back up and move forward. That's the hero's journey. And if you want to verify what I'm saying, there's a professor called Joseph Campbell. He wrote a book on hero's journey. Everything that I'm saying, he quoted it in his book that every good story written in the universe follows the same pattern. And I personally, you have used it over and over again in my personal statement, whatever I applied, and it got me good results. And that's something I would highly encourage you to look into. The next thing I would mention is that when you're writing your personal statement, keep in your head that this is a human being who's reading this. And when they are reading, they might be an American, so you want to use your language, your expressions which are audible to the American culture. You don't want to say things which are happening in India, Pakistan, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Mexico that they can't understand. Because there are some part of things that they won't be able. For example, if I say I was an oral surgery resident and doing GP work in the evening, they won't understand that, right? So I don't want to confuse them because the US system is different. So you want to be calculated about things that will create confusion. Don't mention those things. Like visa issues. People talk about how I came in, I didn't have a work permit. Well, an American person doesn't know how work permits work. They never applied for a US visa. They never applied for a work authorization or a green card. They were born American citizens. So when you try to explain these things, it just confuses them. So I would highly encourage them, I would highly encourage you not to write things which will confuse the committee. Keep it straightforward. Keep it about yourself. The next thing I'll mention is that these people who are reading, you want to show your emotion side a little bit, and you want to talk that you're in a journey, you're in that hero's journey, you're trying to move towards a goal that will not only improve your life, but also the life of the people around you. I'll tell you one thing, the definition of a hero is a person who goes into the unknown and grabs something from there which is of high value and bring it back to his own people so they can make a use out of it too. That's what a hero is. In ancient time, a person used to go out, hunt an animal and bring that meat back to his village. So he was the biggest hunter or the gatherer of the camp of that village, of that tribe, and he would be considered a hero. In the same way, when you're writing a story, it's not about that I want to become a dentist, I want to make a lot of money. You should write it down that I want to pursue this vocation because I believe if you give me this opportunity, not only will I prove my own life, but it would also work with the community around me. I will try to uplift the people around me as well. That's a very important point that you want to mention in the last few paragraphs of your personal statement, because then the reader will be hooked in your story. The thing I tell people, if you have a genuine story where you're pursuing and pushing hard to improve yourself and do something good, people who will read that story will be invested in your growth. They will become your Merlin. They will consider you the next King Arthur, somebody who's the young lad, the young woman who's trying to pursue something good, and they would want to mentor you. They would want to guide you. They would like to give you that push that you need to get the job done. And when you're writing this, you want to have this thought in your mind that I'm telling my journey, how I started crawling, how I'm learning to run, but if you help me out, I would eventually fly. And people who are on the top, reach a certain point where they want to help people if they see somebody is deserving enough. And that's something you want to mention in your personal statement. And in the last paragraph, I usually tell people when I'm working with the candidates is that connect your thought or your story from the first paragraph till the last one. How that inner child, how that kid who once dreamt of becoming a dentist or becoming a healthcare worker or dreaming big, connect your last paragraph that if you give me this opportunity to become a student at your prestigious institute, I will fulfill that dream one day. That's a very important thing that you talk about. That's what completes the arch of a story. The heroes always die where he starts from. That's the hero's journey. So you want to talk about how you're going to connect the idea that you once thought as a child when you were young. Now, I told you a hero's journey and how you can use that to write a good, solid, interesting person statement. But your question would be, Adriel, I'm a normal human being. I'm not a Harry Potter. I'm not a magical child. I can't figure out these kind of things out of my life, which is totally fine. I understand that. But when I work with candidates, trust me, when I discuss things from their life, they will tell me things that they didn't even knew that this was of high importance. For example, I had people who were artists, really good artists, painters, people who were in dramatics, people who were used to working with clays, and they never thought this is important. And once after like 30 minutes of discussion, they said, yeah, I've worked in some dramas, I like to do painting and I like to make clay art and I like to do classical dancing. I'm like, this is one of the most important things that you should have told me earlier, because this is the artistic side of you, the subconscious brain of yours, the expression that you have, and this should be linked to your personal statement and to your vocation in dentistry, because dentistry is a profession of artwork as well. And especially in US, they highly like people who have life beyond academics, who are sportsmen, people who are artists, people who can do crafts work. So I personally, when I talk to people, I don't see a human being. I see multiple personalities in them. And that's one of the things the reason I love working with candidates from diverse background is because sometimes you get to hear stories that they didn't even knew how special it was. And when you try to connect them in the personal statement, you can actually bring out a really good story out of their life. It's just how you look at it. And I know this gives you a little bit headache when I'm saying all of this, because you had this formula about writing personal statement and I'm bringing a canvas of different artwork in front of you. But once you start writing this down and think about it, you will realize that this is a better way to write a more interesting artwork about your life. Now, sometimes people will say, I've heard different gentlemen saying this, Adriel, you're saying this, my friend is saying this. By the end of the day, there is no right and wrong in writing personal statement. There is no one way. There can be very different ways to write it. I've seen people with really crappy personal statements getting accepted. It's totally fine. That's totally normal. But you should write a story which should satisfy your soul. It's very important that you should write a personal statement that should satisfy you. Once you read it, you should feel like this is the person who I wanted to represent them. This is my story. This is who I am. Now, the second thing I would tell you is that there are a lot of people right now that I've heard about who help write personal statement to majority of candidates. And these are people who work on very high volume, who write 10, 15, 20 personal statements in a month. But the downside is I had candidates call me who got to know from their schools or one way or another that they had a copy-pasted personal statement. As I mentioned in the start, there are visa agents in Pakistan, India, who are selling you the dream of getting you a student visa to US, but never themselves have ever came to US or studied in a school up here. In the same way, there are people who are selling you this dream that they know how to get into a dental school, how dental school work, and never even been to one, never entered a dental school, doesn't know the dynamic of dentistry. And I feel that's not a good approach. And there are a lot of people who can help you with person statements, with CAPIT, but I would say do your homework first. See who the person is. You want to know who the person is. Is he a trustworthy person? What's their philosophy or approach to it? Even if it costs you more, work with people who you trust, who you know are sincere to the work and who are going to do their best to get you accepted to a dental school. By the end of the day, the result belongs to your destiny. It's decided by God. But if you're going to pay, make sure you work with people who are going to give your best and not try to see you as a product. That's one of the biggest things, because I had students, candidates who would reach out, say, I'm writing a person statement for Colorado. Somebody suggested me I should use keywords like HIPAA, lifelong learner, some other words. Will this make my person statement stronger? Because I have heard that if you use these words, your application gets picked out. And my answer was no. It doesn't matter if you do it this way, because I would write a person statement if I was writing for LinkedIn, for Twitter, if a software was reading this. These are real life human beings. And I can tell you from my experience that the faculty in dental school are very particular people. The ones I've worked with, and I respect my Colorado faculty and the program director a lot, because she is a very particular person. She will go through each and every detail. That's her biggest quality. She's not somebody who would overlook over something or let the softwares figure it out. She's a dentist, she's very particular, and she will look into everything she reads. So if you think you're going to put these terms like keywords, and this is an IT kind of a job or something, it's not going to work that way. And don't get, I won't say don't follow the advice of people who are thinking this is an IT job or this is something like a chat GPT. It's not. Think about this as a canvas of artwork. This is you representing your own struggle in a way that makes it look meaningful. And you have to think of this in a different perspective. And that's one of the key things. It took me years to figure out why do I listen to other people regarding CAPIT and I don't feel happy. There's hardly very few people or very few words when I hear them, I say, okay, this makes sense. This is a good advice. Now I realize it because they give formulas. They look at education as a product and as formulas. I think it's a piece of artwork. This is your life and everybody is different. Everybody is made different. Everybody acts different. And everybody should be presented in a unique manner. And that's my approach when I look at person statements. If you have any other questions, if you have any comments, kindly write it down. I was planning to say it earlier during my video, but I got so lost in my thoughts. But please like the video. If you have any comment, write it down, because what I learned that the analytics of YouTube and the way they work, if you write in the comments, it will allow other foreign trained dentists to see this video and maybe they will find some help out of my words. So if you write in the comment anything, even say hi, whatever you want to say, you want to say something bad to me, go ahead, do it. It's all good. Or like the video or subscribe to the channel. This will help not only me, encourage me, but also a lot of people who will be applying to dental schools in the future. So thank you for doing that. And if you feel like you want to learn more regarding the things that I'm saying, I'm doing a workshop on the in February. I posted Q&A sessions on my Instagram. I might share a link in the description. Follow me on Instagram. If you have any questions, you can text me up there, and hopefully I'll try to get back to you at the earliest. And I wish you all the best in this process, and hopefully you'll learn more about personal statement and personal branding. So in future, not only do you become a good dentist, but hopefully you understand the business aspect in the United States so you don't get abused by non-dental people. I wish you all the best. Take care.